Fleet Management Systems Analyst. He's been extremely instrumental in the rollout and implementation of Fleet Management System and training of personnel statewide. MDOT's performance, too many M's, and metric reports and national performance metric reports for MDOT.
So I'm sure none of you have seen a national performance metrics presentation. This one's going to be pretty good. It's going to be the best one, obviously. My name's Andy Bannasch, as Doug introduced. I definitely work for MDOT. We always start this presentation off with this cartoon. I love this cartoon. It shows the dinosaur showing the comet data going up, and I'm a fleet management system analyst, so I run reports and I write reports, and then obviously we want to use data, and the other dinosaur is saying, no, I just want to trust my gut. So here at MDOT, we have myself as an analyst. We have in the back, in the flower shirt, Scott Poyer, who's a fleet specialist who does our purchasing and writes specs, among many other things. And then we have our new and improved fleet manager that replaced Scott Rattery, Brandon Knepp. Been here about a year, and that picture right there is our garage where we actually build the trucks up. Just to give you a little background on the performance metrics, it started in 2010 as a discussion and a survey, I think at this meeting, but I don't know that for sure. So we talked about it a lot, and then the end result after that survey in 2012, the AASHTO Subcommittee on Maintenance adopted Resolution 1203, which is Equipment Fleet Management Performance Metrics. And in between then and 2019, we had many, usually quarterly, maybe even more, fleet management system webinars. So what we would do, a couple states, usually about 10 would join, and we would discuss our fleet management systems, the codes, and the challenges we had. In between then and now, we had many presentations. As you can see, I'm up on the stage right there. And then in July 2013, we had the initial posting to the website. And I'll show you the website here in a little bit. So why would you measure? There's a lot of stuff on this slide, but basically, we measure so that we can collaborate. We can see one state that's doing really good. For example, if you're doing really good on retention, I might call you and ask you how you're funded or how you're turning your vehicles over, maybe selling them really fast. And quite frankly, most of these metrics, at least a couple of them, are ones that you're going to want to be running anyway, preventive maintenance and retention especially. But you can benchmark. You can see the details behind it, and I'm going to show you that. At MDOT, we have had a very positive impact. One thing I can show you is preventive maintenance. We went from about 50% compliant when we started measuring it, because obviously if we're not measuring it and we're not letting our end users or the mechanics know when they actually have to fix the stuff, that they're not going to do it on time. It's just going to be up to them. So when we actually started measuring it and sending that out, we improved to about 95%, and that's about where we're staying. So we've been at 95% for a long time, and that's great. That's our best impact so far. You can compare with other DTs, which I already said, and the comprehensive asset management approach, which we always talk about. So that's managing your asset from a request till you procure it, till it's in the system and you're working on it and it's doing its work, and then till you sell it. So what makes a good metric? So it has to fit your organization and operational needs and aligns with the strategic plan. I can tell you, if you can fit a metric to your strategic plan, it looks extremely professional and it will potentially sway management one way or another. It gets a lot of attention. It needs to be clear. There's leading and lagging indicators. So a leading indicator would be before something happens, and a lagging indicator would be after something happens. The source or the data, you need to balance your needs versus your wants. So obviously everyone wants everything. And I think that is just listening from the room over the past week. A lot of people have systems, they're trying to implement systems, or they already have systems and they're trying to get information out. There's a lot of data out there, but you have to know what you want, and you just because you can run 100 reports doesn't mean you should. You should run very specific reports because if you overload someone, then they'll just stop looking at them. You need to balance high level and getting into the weeds, which is kind of what I just said. So we had 5 key metrics. So in 2012, they approved, we had 4 of them. We had utilization, preventive maintenance, availability, downtime, and replacement recommended. And then in 2017, we added another metric, scheduled versus unscheduled repairs. And I'm going to be getting into each one of these. I'm going to give you tips on running them. Not that the people in this room need to know the very specific details on how to run them, but at least so you know what goes into running them and what considerations you need to make when entering data into your system or picking a system and that type of stuff. So you get recognition on EMTSP's website. I'm going to show you that. You compare with other DOTs, and you got to know where you are so that you can know where you want to be. I believe we've heard that several times this week. So the NAVA codes, this is a huge one. The NAVA codes, which are right here, those are actually on the EMTSP website, and that's what they look like if you can see them. But if you can't, there's a ton of codes out there. I was lucky to be gifted with these set of codes. We call them group numbers in the state of Michigan. They align perfectly with the NAFA codes, and here I hear a lot of, it's not really complaints, but it's a lot of work to map your NAFA codes just for these performance metrics to each of your assets. So what you can do, we did not map them in Michigan. Our grouping of codes already mirrors potentially what we want. Really, we want to get to these categories right here. The NAFA codes are just a way to get there. So light vehicles is NAFA codes 1 and 2, but really it's anything under 10,000 GVW. Cars, minivans, SUVs, half-ton trucks, and three-quarter-ton trucks. All of those you probably have some sort of category or group number for in whatever system you use. So you just group those all together, call it light. Medium, 10,000 to 26. Heavy, above 26. Off-road and construction would be equipment that has an engine that can move, everything else non-self-propelled. That's basically how we map them in the state of Michigan. They line up with the NAFA codes, so you don't have to use the NAFA codes. They are available on the EMTSP website. We got permission to post them there if you want to look at them or use them. So, but you don't have to, if you already have a coding system, which most of you probably do, and it can tie to it, you don't have to use the NAFA codes specifically. So utilization, you can see the definition up there, but I'm going to give you mine. It's basically, you know, number of days used, engine hours, miles. There's many ways to measure it. However you want to measure it, that's fine. Whatever your measurement is. If it's 320 engine hours for a loader, then that's fine. That's your measurement. So here is what it actually looks like in our system. That's the table it comes from. I can edit it. Here is what it looks like when it goes to our end users. You can see I put it in a nice graph. It's got colors. It's by quarter and it's by month. So you can see this one's pretty good. A couple months it was underutilized, but nothing's typically utilized every single month. So the calculation, this is a lot of stuff. This slide's mainly meant for people to review after we're done with this presentation, but I can give you a quick example of a winter maintenance truck. Our retention is 300 engine hours. A minivan's 10,000 miles, so if it's below that, it's going to get the yellow. If it's way below that, it's getting the red. And for these national performance metrics, we have stoplights that I'm going to show you later that tie to those. We gather data in our fleet management system, monthly, quarterly, yearly, and for the life. Worst case scenario, if you don't gather data, which usually it's through fuel for us, you can just take the total mileage you have in there, which is usually updated when someone makes a work order, and just divide it by the number of years in service. That'll give you your average per year. Unfortunately, the older it gets, the harder that average is to, or the less the average is going to change. So it's only really a good measure. That way is only really a good measure if the vehicle is rather new. Typically need a table with many, like every month has your engine hours or whatever data you need. You can compare it against the standard and there's the math there, but basically you come up with a percentage and then you would enter that on the form. So preventive maintenance, all right, this is the big one, a big one. This is something that most EOTs probably already do in some form or fashion, I would think. So porting this out is most definitely a possibility for everyone. You can see in the top corner right there and right there, that is what it actually looks like in our system where I set the intervals. This is what actually gets reported out to our individual mechanics and supervisors at the garage so they can know it's overdue, it's not overdue. And for EMTSP, you know, I just add them all up and do the math. Date-based is good. I will say that many fleet management systems try to predict a date, right? So it's gonna go, it's due next Tuesday. That didn't really work for us. We developed a percentage base, so it just takes the raw, if it's due every 300 hours and it's at 200 hours, then you know that's a certain percentage. We found that with the date-based, our equipment just did not have enough regular utilization. There were too many spikes, and those dates went all over the place every time that calculation ran. So that worked a lot better for us. So if you're having problems with preventive maintenance and scheduling dates, please try and do it by percentage. That seems to work really well for us. So there's a sample of the report that I actually send to the end users. Availability downtime. There's the definition right there, but availability is basically when it's available to be used. Downtime is, for us, it's when it's being worked on in our fleet management system. So when a mechanic's working on it, you can't use it in construction, that means it is down. And availability is just the opposite of downtime. So there's the math right there. You can see at the very bottom, that is actually what I send to our end users in the DOT, how we actually calculate. It's the difference between the open date and the completed date of a work order. So if you have a work order, if you have an open date and a completed date, you should be able to calculate downtime. I think I have a slide, yep, right here. You can get a hold of this after the presentation. If you enter this Excel formula right here exactly as you see it, it's going to tell you how many days it was down. So what you do is you take that, take how many days it was down. There's about 30 days in a month. You do the math, and you have your downtime for a month. That's how we do it in the state of Michigan, although to a finer degree. As you can see somewhere on here, we actually calculate, our fleet management system calculates it in milliseconds, and then I have to convert it, which is 3.6 million milliseconds in hours, and then I use that to do the math and calculate how much downtime it is in a month. So replacement recommended. I'm going to show you this, the next slide. I'm pretty positive every single DOT or even fleet can do this. So all you need to know is how old it is. You need a unit number, how old it is, its in-service date, and that's the exact formula right there. If you plug it in, so you get a hold of this presentation, put it in Excel. I actually did this for one DOT in Excel. It will tell you your retention. This is the best one probably to show management. It's a really simple one to show management, and they understand it. So one positive story in the state of Michigan, our management knows we have 300 plow trucks, and if we do not replace 30 in a year, then we're falling behind, and we are right on that edge of falling behind. So we're always right there. So we in recent years, consistently, after we were setting this up, we get about 30 trucks a year. Now, our other stuff falls behind because plow trucks are our priority, but this is probably the number one metric, in my opinion, and everyone should be running it in some form or fashion. So scheduled versus unscheduled. We added this one in 2017. There is the definition, which I'll just tell you. Scheduled is basically when it comes in for us, most likely preventative maintenance, warranty, it's not a breakdown. Unscheduled, or as you can see in our fleet management system, corrective would be unscheduled. So you just, when I run the report, it just adds them all up. Every time someone opens a work order in our system, they have to enter this visit reason right there. So that's a pretty easy thing for me to get a hold of. If you have a different system, different job codes, you might have to map to those to know exactly what's scheduled and unscheduled, but almost all your preventive maintenance is going to be scheduled, and then a breakdown is going to be unscheduled. You can determine what codes are considered scheduled or unscheduled. We use the work order visit reason. You would divide the number of work orders that are scheduled by the total work orders in the NAFA code to get the actual percentage. And there's a report that I send out to end users in case you were interested. Since 2019, and this is kind of where I want to get into the details here, here is who has reported since 2019. I will admit, even Michigan, we didn't report twice a year. I actually have to run it this coming month. We would like it reported twice a year, July and December, or January, but if you do it in November, if you do it in May, they're not going to turn you down. I'm going to show you the form in a second to how you submit it. You could submit it pretty much any time, but preferably biannually. So great job, Western States. I think we can really bump these numbers up with the retention report if we can get more people on board with running that consistently, even if it's in a spreadsheet. Incremental progress. Do not fry your brain, as I love that. I found that graphic. That's actually what the stoplights look like. So don't let the enemy of perfect be good, which I think, I saw that on the agenda as well. Pick the easiest metric first, so that's typically replacement recommended. You don't have to report every single metric or even every category. So here's an example right here. This state did not report They couldn't break it out by the NAFTA codes, but they knew their overall, so they just reported the overall, and that's fine. So you start small and you keep going. We can do them all, but we've been working on this, well, for about 14 years now. So we just keep improving a little bit every time. So the website has all the metrics. It has a form section. It has state folders. It has state folders for supporting documents. So every time you submit a form, or if you want to put a presentation like this in there, there's supporting documents under each state that you can go to, and you can see all this info. And it's EMTSP.org. That's what it looks like. So when you go to EMTSP.org, you got all this, and it's a great site, but right here is the best part of it. National Performance Metrics, it's actually a button, so if you click it, it will take you there. This is the bread and butter of the National Performance Metrics. So at the top here, we've got some kind of informational stuff right here. And I'm going to go over each one of these, and then at the bottom are each individual state that has reported. And if you go into each state, you'll see at the very top the date they actually reported. So some of them might be 2017, 2019, 21. You can actually see where the data is. If you go into the bottom of that, there's a supporting documents section that will actually tell you, you actually view the form that they actually filled out if you really needed to. So here's the actual form. This isn't exactly what it looks like because it wouldn't fit on the page. But the top looks like this, right? So you're just going to enter Michigan reporting period, July 2022, and then each metric just has a little tiny section, and you put the percentages in each one, and then you hit submit, and it goes right to that ncpp@egr.msu.edu. It also goes to Scott Rattery's email, which we have to get switched. So I'm sure he doesn't want to see those emails anymore, although I'm pretty sure he's not checking his state of Michigan email. So, and like I said, July and January preferably, but we are not going to turn down if they are submitted at any other time. Here's what the actual stoplights look like. We came up with these percentages as a group, this group actually. I think they're pretty good. The actual stoplights aren't the important part, in my opinion. The percentages are, and the collaboration. So you could see, like, we're really good at preventive maintenance. Maybe someone could reach out to me if you're having problems with yours. Retention's a really good one. I know one state's doing excellent on it, and we just haven't reached out to them yet. But that's what it looks like. And so each one has a stoplight approach, so you can kind of see red and green and yellow. Also, we have a DOT National Metrics contact list. That was one of those links right under the form. This does need to be updated, so maybe we can get this updated while we're doing the other list as well, because the nice part about this is you can see what system everyone's using. So we added that in there in case someone has the same system as you, but it sounds like that has changed drastically in the past couple of years. So a lot of people have been switching systems. Also fleet managers, as you can see, Scott Rattery's still in there. So we want to switch that. So we need to get this updated. I think this is a pretty important part of the metrics, so you can see who has what system, maybe who can help you out the most. Pretty sure this hasn't been updated in a couple of years, so it would be good to get it refreshed. Michigan DOT assistance. So thanks to Teams, I personally probably can assist almost every DOT, because I think most of you use Teams. Or if you don't, I can just schedule a webinar with Teams, and you can just log in via the web. And I can help you remotely. I can control your screen. I can show you my screen, show you what we're doing. I love it. I help mechanics with it all the time. It's probably the best thing that's ever happened for remote help, in my opinion. I can send you sample reports, although they're not going to be super useful for you because every single DOT is a little bit different. Even if we have the same fleet management system, your coding is going to be different and your classification is going to be different. Replacement recommended, like I said, someone sent me their inventory in a spreadsheet, and then I did their metric. So it's pretty straightforward if you use that formula I gave you, but I could also help out and probably make a template that you could just copy all the way down. And like I said, I could probably, one of the biggest hurdles is that coding. I could help you with the coding. So if I review your codes, which I did for that organization, it was pretty easy to pick out what was what. Pretty much the codes aligned below 10,000, above 10,000. Those are pretty industry standard. So lessons learned. So you need to document what you're doing, and then how you're doing it, and then why. And I think we've heard this before. You need an effective way to gather the info. It could be your fleet management system. We use also a fuel system, which is WEX and Voyager on occasion, your financial system, and others. Sometimes you got to merge them all, and that's when kind of Excel comes into play, or maybe your IT department. But You take what you can get where you can. For us, we're kind of lucky. We've integrated a lot of this into our fleet management system. So most of our procurement, we enter. When we procure the unit into our fleet management system, fuel we import and get the engine hours and all the fuel and utilization. So we kind of have it all. And then obviously our mechanics and our clerks enter work orders and make outsourced work orders in our system, so we know the costs. But it's always a challenge to make sure that that cost is correct and actually what we spent. It's important to do a statewide coordinated approach, so you don't just want to do one district, right? You want to probably do your whole state. And continuous training is imperative. I added this at the end. So just to give you an example, I know some of you are rolling out your fleet management systems right now. I have trained some users 5, 6, 7 times. Typically what happens, and it's not really an issue anymore, but I would go out and train someone, and then they would forget half of what I trained them on, right? Because you can't remember it all. So, and then it's really helpful to go back out a month later. So if you're implementing a system and training people, if you initially train them and then train them a month or even 2 or 6 months later, they will have excellent questions and they will learn massively more because they'll be used to the system. That is important. Getting good data in your system is extremely important for these metrics, because if it's not good, then people won't actually look at the reports. So every state's using performance metrics, but there are differences among the states. It's important to tie your performance metrics to that strategic plan, which I talked about. It looks really professional. The tendency is to measure what's easiest, but you got to be careful, because whatever you measure will drive behavior. So if you measure retention, that's good, right? Because we want to replace vehicles that are past our retention. But you don't want to measure something extremely specific, not for these metrics, but other metrics, and have that drive a very specific behavior. Like, for example, closing a work order out very fast. You may find that your mechanics start closing them out ahead of time, right, to beat that metric, to continually improve. So yes, the national performance metrics mean benchmarking comparison, but the focus is on collaboration, in my opinion, and it has been. We've been doing this for a while, and there really hasn't been any pushback from any state or any problems, so it is a very collaborative effort. How can you help? So you can lend support, learn and ask about fleet operations, so like about these metrics, tie them to your operation specifically. Identify barrier busting is what they call it. So like if you have personnel issues, for example, I was hired in 2008 specifically to implement our fleet management system. That's the only thing I did. It actually took us a year between the time we started and every single person was trained, but that's the only thing I did for a very long time, years, because I had to keep retraining people. We kept adding new codes, revising them. A good example would be our work order job codes. We had a huge list. So, if anyone has AssetWorks, they give you the APWA list. Well, we were getting complaints from the field that they could select more than one job for the same task. So we had a bunch of our mechanics get together and we pared it down. So that's something you got to do. Since 2009, we've been having quarterly fleet management system meetings, along with our otherly quarterly meetings with people that come statewide every quarter. So we've been improving that long. So that's kind of what it takes to get it off the ground, and then obviously funding. Manage your fleet metrics with other competing requirements. Obviously, you don't want to just focus on fleet metrics. Align your metrics to the road and bridge program, offer suggestions to improve or energize and use implementation of fleet metrics, and then obviously endorse them at your DOT. If you could just start with one, that would be great. And a replacement recommended is obviously the best one, in my opinion. So what's next? So I made this presentation before we had our discussion. So I kind of know what's next. We could have web meetings, we could have in-person meetings, or we can make a new metric, but I think we decided that's probably not the best right now. Right now we have 39 states plus Saskatchewan, so I don't think they're here today, but thank you, Saskatchewan, that have reported at least one metric at some time, but only 9 since 2019. We could collaborate to assist states not building or not be able to report, so I could personally help, which I've offered to. Focus on replacement recommended. And a good news story I want to share, South Dakota actually shared this a couple years ago. Same exact story as Michigan. They started reporting their preventive maintenance and they saw a huge jump when they started doing that. So when you start reporting these metrics, it's very beneficial, obviously for collaboration between us, but just for you within your state. So if you could tell us any benefits that you've experienced, that would be very powerful, because it's really useful to go back to our management, upper management, and ask for additional resources in fleet management because of these good stories. And I believe Brad used our story to get this off the ground. How do performance metrics tie to future initiatives? So electrification, I think this possibly has unique opportunity for different metrics. Obviously, you're not fueling, you're plugging in electric, but there's the number of a whole bunch of different metrics you can do with electric, like kilowatt hours and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to trying that. We don't have any electrics yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So your staffing, you got to make sure you staff up. So I think a lot of you might be figuring out keeping up a fleet management system or keeping this data up it takes a lot of time. It would eat a lot of your analyst time. So having staff to do that is important. In-source versus, we could do some additional reports, but I think we decided that we're just going to focus on getting the current state, getting everyone to try and report at least one metric first before we go into additional metrics. We talked about it in the Midwest, and I know you guys all talked about it. I couldn't really think off the top of my head, or even when I thought overnight, of a really good metric for national performance in addition to this yet. So to make a good metric, as I discussed before, it kind of has to be simple so that it ties to everybody. I think we got a good set right now, and I think we should just focus on those. And everyone agreed yesterday. So I will say that, like I said earlier, our fleet management system webinars, there's all the dates. I'm not going to list them all off and who attended, but I thought those were beneficial. We could kick those off again if this group wants to do that. I could just schedule some dates and do that. I know they were extremely helpful for some states and us as well. New metrics. We're not going to do any new metrics, but the one I do like, which Jay tied into, which we don't currently do, but I think we're going to try and do, number of days per period or per month. We don't do this one. I personally love this one. It ties into utilization, and I think that it's more valuable than engine hours or miles, in my opinion, because you could have a unit that goes, for example, from Lansing to the farthest garage in Michigan, which is Houghton, 10 hours away. They could take that trip once a month, and it could potentially be utilized in our report, but it's only utilized for 1 day a month. Let's say it only goes up to that garage 1 day a month, and then it just sits. That's a good use for a pool vehicle, right? So I think that's a really good metric. So if you have that capability, I highly recommend running it. Number of days used. Going to be especially good for electrics, where they're going to have you're going to put them in urban situations where there's a lot of small trips. So there's my contact info, and this is like the question section. Usually there's a ton of questions. I know you all have questions. Well, thanks. Well, I think we can really focus on replacement recommended and get that off the ground. I'm sure that in some way, shape, or form, most DOTs are probably already doing that. But thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.